Hello and welcome to Rosie's Preserving School on Valentine's Day, and here we are making marmalade. Say no more. We're going to be making today lemon and lime marmalade. Now, in the past, we have made Seville orange and I think blood orange marmalade, different marmalades, but fundamentally, I always use the same method. And it's stood by me all these years. I first made marmalade when I was 15, and I chopped up all these raw oranges, which took me, nearly a whole day. And I thought, I'm never making marmalade again. And I didn't until I found this method, which is the whole fruit method. And ever since then, which was about, I don't know, my mid-20s, I've made marmalade in this way, regardless of what the fruit is. I just adapt the recipe to accommodate whichever fruit I want to use. Because it is just so much easier. You don't have all that raw fruit cutting up, which is so hard to do, and then trying to tenderize the peel and everything else. So all I'm saying is if you're new to the workshops and you want to make any kind of Seville orange or orange marmalade, have a look at the previous workshops, which are free to view, and you can cook along with those and make the orange marmalade if you want a bit of sort of backup, a bit of support with the ingredients and so on. It is a bit of a longer process with Sevilles and not quite so much with sweet oranges. But the lemon and lime, because of the amount of acid and pectin and everything, is a lot quicker to make. Now, I have said in the past that I don't make straight lime marmalade, lime on its own, because I find the taste too challenging. It is very strong. But you may have relatives that have diminished taste, sensations and things that would prefer it. Or you may prefer it, but I just find it's almost inedible because it's just so powerfully flavored. So I do like the lemon and lime mix because it's predominantly the lemon fruit in it and then the zest and the lime juice, which isn't quite so challenging as the cooked peel as a whole. So, but it's up to you if you want to give it a go. And I think, we were all brought up probably on Rose's lime marmalade, which is just such a pretty green colour. But lime marmalade made without colouring it at all, it tends to be a bit sort of khaki coloured and not very nice to look at and even less nice to eat, I find. But that's my personal taste. So what we have is our lemon. So I've already cooked them as per the recipe. They need to be pre-cooked. And this is what I do with all of my marmalade recipes. I cook either the day before, or if it's a weekend, I can cook them in the morning and let them cool down. Thing is, you are going to be handling them. So if you cook them, I mean, I used to do that when I was making to sell. I'd be handling red hot fruit, trying to cut it, holding the fruit with tongs and trying to cut it up without touching it because it was still too hot because I was on a tight time schedule. But basically, you need to let it all cool down and then you can get on and cut it up as you wish. Now, if you can see in the pan, if we get pan cam on, the 750 grams of lemons, which is 30 ounces, turned out to be 4 big lemons, but it do it by weight because some of the lemons, they all vary in size. So, and you can see when you put them in and they're all tough, aren't they? And they get cooked and they end up being like those sort of punctured footballs. They've got sort of dense and they're all sort of squishy looking, and that's fine. That's not wrong. That's just great. So they're in there. I'm going to take them out and put them on this plate because what I want to do is measure the liquid that's left. If you've got a pan that's got a measure on the side, that's great. This one hasn't. So I'm going to see, because when you're cooking them to soften them, some of the water boils away and you want a certain amount in there. So the water was 1.8 litres and it is now oops, it's now just under a litre. So I'm going to put a bit more back in, but we'll have the fruit juice to go in. So I'm not too strict. It hasn't boiled away too much. I'm just going to put a little bit in. So that's 1.2 litres now. Back in the pan. Leave that. Now I'm going to cut the lemons up. I'm going to put that up there. I'm doing them on a plate because there is so much juice that you end up with it all over the table if you don't sort of contain it a bit. So I might put the spare ones into a bowl so I've got more room to move. And you'll see when you start to do it, they're beautifully soft. And all the juice comes out, including the pips. Now, we don't want the pips in there. So I'm going to sort of get those all over to one side as I do it so that they, with marmalade, you would put those into a bag or something and cook it with the fruit according to the recipe. But lemon and lime marmalade has got so much pectin and so on in it that I don't really worry to do that. So then just cut your peel and you can see how beautifully soft it is. I move that over a bit. And you can cut it any size that you want. You can cut it extremely finely or chunkier, depending what you need. And the pith, as you can see, is all cooked. It's all translucent. You don't need to be scraping that out or anything like that. You just cut the whole thing up. So cut that across, and all the juice and all of the flesh will go back into the pan. I know a lot of people like to make shredless marmalade. I've never been very successful with getting it to set, I have to say. I think what I would do if I didn't want the peel in there is still cook it in the water and then lift it out with a slotted spoon near the end, because it needs that in there to help the marmalade to set. So this first bit I'm going to put into the pan, back into the water. And carry on. Gonna pick out the pips. Actually, now it's sort of the bulk of the juices out. I'm going to cut it on the mat. I can't stand the sound of the knife cutting on the plate. That one, more pips. If you want to take out this center membrane, you can, if you can get it out in one piece, and then just take off any flesh. It depends on your lemons. Some of them are softer than others. That's that. And then also take off the stalky bit at the top there. You don't want that in there. Questions? Right, number 2. Well, the juice. Put that into the pan in a moment. The peel is beautifully soft, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. Some marmalade recipes, you've got to sort of keep checking the peel is softened and all the rest of it. But because you've pre-cooked it, all you've got to worry about now is getting the set. So you can, even if it's quite chunky, it's lovely to eat because it's just really, really soft. So I'm not taking a lot of time cutting this up because you're obviously waiting for something else to happen. And, but if you want to take a bit more time making it exactly as you like it, then that's fine. If you're cutting up and you find a bit that hasn't quite been under the water and it's a bit tough, just leave it out. You'll have plenty of peel without it. So don't put in something that isn't lovely and soft. There's no point ruining it for one piece of lemon. All those pips out. And that piece. I'm going to put my hob on just on a sort of medium heat to start getting some heat into the pan. Always surprises me that marmalade making is so popular and there's no specific sort of machinery to do the peel cutting. There's old fashioned ones from Victorian times which you can buy, sort of antique ones, but I wouldn't cut up anything I was going to eat with it. But since that time there's been no development. We've got machines for just about everything these days. but not marmalade making. Oops, 2 more pips. Oh, that comes out really easily, the center membranes and the pips and everything. Mind you, as with so many machines, it would probably take longer to take it apart and wash it all up than it would to just cut it by hand. If I've got a lot of marmalade I'm doing and I've got a lot more than this to cut up, I'll kind of get into a Zen state with it. I'll put a story or something on my phone and listen, or some music, and you can get quite lost in it, really. I don't look upon it as a chore. It's just one of those things, and it's quite nice. It's a repetitive task when you can be thinking about lots of other things. Goes in. That. Right, last one. This one's really collapsed. But it's good when you see that, because you know they're really, really cooked all the way through, and going to be lovely and soft. Let's get that out of the middle. There we are. The other good thing about this particular marmalade, of course, is that you can make it at any time of the year. You don't have to wait for a special orange or something. You can just make it, if you want to put marmalade into hampers or something, you can make it near Christmas if you want to. So there's no time scale on it. The most successful marmalade without using Seville oranges, if you want an orange marmalade, I think is a 3 fruit, which is oranges, grapefruit and lemon. And that gives a very authentic flavour that tastes very much like Seville oranges. So, don't be dismayed if you've missed them. And when I've got room, I also freeze Seville oranges so I can make it later in the year, because sometimes it's just not convenient when they're around. Right, one little piece to go. Take off the top stalk. It's that. Take all that in. I know there's going to be a pip that's in there somewhere that's escaped. There always is. Try and be careful, and then it's right. That's that. Now the bits that I don't want, I'm just going to put into there so they don't get into the pan. All the pips. And then this, I'm going to scrape in. Give it a stir. I'm just going to wash my hands. Not wearing too much of it, so that's good. I'll just wipe up the juice. much as I can. Okay, so that's the lemon bit. And I'm going to now put in the lime. Now, I don't put the lime flesh in, as I've said. I don't, cut them up and cook them with the lemons or anything like that. What I'm going to do is put the pan down here for a moment, and I'm going to zest the peel straight into the pan to save losing any. So make sure there's no sort of stalky bit on the top that's going to end up in there. So just finely zest straight in, and it can capture the majority of the oils, which are always in the skin of citrus fruit. If you want flavour, that's where it will be. So I'm going to go around. I've got 6 here. I've picked the 4 greenest so that you get those sort of green flecks in it. They do go yellow very quickly, limes, once they're kind of in your fruit bowl, which is annoying. But anyway, I've managed to get 4 that are very green. So I'll do those. You don't have to be exact about it, just but always zest before you cut them in half to squeeze. It's impossible otherwise. No, it's fantastic. That's 3. Last one. Good. So I'm going to stir that in. And now I'm going to put the sugar in, which is 1.5 kilos of granulated sugar, or 36 ounces. And don't be afraid of the sugar in marmalade. You have to have the right amounts to achieve the set. So if you follow the recipes, you'll be okay. It's just white granulated. You don't need anything sort of super special. Just buy the most reasonable price one you can. And if there's an offer on in any of the sort of places, supermarkets and all the rest of it, you can store sugar indefinitely. So if you know you're going to be doing a lot of preserving, then stock up on the sugar that you need. There's nothing worse than coming home, from a fruit farm or something in the summer and thinking you're going to make all sorts of jam and or jellies or cordials, and you haven't got enough sugar. Sugar is, what's the word? Yeah, I can't think of the word. It's just completely stable. Sorry? Inert, that's it. It doesn't go off, it doesn't change. You could keep it 25 years and it would still be usable and completely safe. It might have stuck together a bit if it's got damp, but it wouldn't be unsafe. Okay, that's why we use it in preserving, because it brings those properties to the jams and so on. So I'm going to put it on to heat up, and I need the sugar to dissolve. I'm going to put my big jam making paddle in. I'm going to let some heat get into it. You can hear at the moment the sugar in there. And I can feel it as well on the spoon. And that's a important point to take note of. You put the sugar in, but it isn't dissolved. So we'll get some heat in because that will help dissolve it. And while that's happening, I'm going to squeeze the lemons. Now I'm going to use my electric citrus squeezer. My right hand is very, very weak, so I find it difficult to squeeze more than about 1 or 2 fruit on an ordinary, juicer. So if I'm doing quite a few, then I get the electric kit out. I'm going to include the 2 yellowy ones. They're perfectly all right. They just lost their colour. So that's that. And you'll see, if I did these by hand, I'd get some juice out, but it would hurt too much to do it, and I'd give up. And that's how they end up completely dry on the inside, which is great. I wouldn't be able to achieve that by hand. It goes back the other way and make sure that everything is removed. Just give this a stir to help the sugar. Still a bit gritty. Do it more carefully. That's it, all done. All beautifully stripped out and nothing left. I haven't got any use for spent lime halves, I'm afraid. I'll plug that. And there's all the lovely juice. Let's see if I can read the measure on the side. It is there, but I can't see it in this light. Anyway, there's quite a lot of lime juice in those 6 limes. So that goes in. Oops, the other cover come off. And so I can't hear the sugar or feel it now. So that needs to come up to a boil. So it's on high, and I will let it get on and come up to the rolling boil, and then we can start timing it. I haven't made too much of a mess for me. I've usually managed to spill something. Well, that's it. So I've got 2 room temperature saucers here. I hope I'll only need 1, but I've got 2 to test on. I always do just the crinkle test. I don't use the thermometer because I don't find them terribly reliable. Not the big jam thermometers anyway. You could probably fare better with a digital thermometer, but I've got so used to not using one and to just test it by eye and by doing it on a plate. I don't put them in the fridge first, because I find when you take them out of the fridge, they're cold, and then you put the hot jam on it, you're just taking them out of the fridge, especially if the room is warm, they get condensation on them, and then you won't be able to test for a set because they're already wet. So you need a dry sauce. I'll keep it at room temperature, and if necessary, I will put it into the fridge once I put the preserve onto it, whether it's jam or marmalade or whatever it is. So I've got those ready. I've got some jars. These are the good old £1 jam jars. They're 370 ml, and I tend to use those just for us if I'm not selling things these days, but when I was selling, I would put it in a smaller jar because it kept it at a more cost-effective price for people. But for home, I do them in sort of £1 jars. And then if I want to give one away to a relative, you aren't giving away a huge great jar of something. I just sort of keep it manageable like that. And I've got my lids. And it might be worth having a little recap on this, because we haven't made jam for a while, and some of you haven't made jam or marmalade or anything with me at all. By all means, recycle jars. That's fine. Love that. But you need an effective lid. Now we have sample packs of lids on the Love Jars site, which have got all the commercially available lids in a pack. And if you regularly collect jars and you don't know what the sizes are, I recommend you get one of those packs. I mean, just email me and I'll send you one. We don't have to make us. I mean, you should order it, but you don't need to in this instance. And that will help you. If those won't fit on your jars, then there aren't any lids available for those jars. And that is because if you're saving a jar from a product, then that manufacturer hasn't got you in mind when they're creating the design for their product. They're thinking about what's going to appeal to people buying from a deli or somewhere like that, or a supermarket. They're not trying to facilitate you reusing the jar. So they don't care whether it fits or not. It doesn't come into their thought processes. And they will often have custom made lids for their products that don't fit any sizes. There's about 11 international standard sizes available, but if they don't fit, there's no point asking anybody to see if you can get them, because you won't be able to. There's a question. Oh yeah, Tracy says, yeah, if you get a sample set, then keep it by you, keep it in the kitchen drawer, and then you will know. I mean, if you can't use the jars that you've saved, if they go in the recycling, then that's almost as good, because the UK manufacturers manage the doorstep recycling and the recycling bins at supermarkets, and it's all collected, it's all reused, and they can put up to 70% recycled glass back into a new jar. They have to add in 30% as a minimum of new glass to sort of give it enough strength, you know, because by the time it's gone through the system, and also I suppose level out different composition of glass, because I think some glass is different to others. But anyway, 70% recycled content in a new jar is pretty good going. And it is all used. They do it. They prefer to use the recycled glass, obviously, because they probably get it for next to nothing. But it will go around, and it can keep going round forever. There's no limit to the amount of times that glass can be recycled. So don't feel guilty if you toss it in the recycling and think, oh, you know, I should save it, I should try and use it. If you can't seal it effectively, then don't bother, because you don't want to go to all this effort making things and then it becomes contaminated with mold or something like that, because it hasn't been sealed properly. And that's what makes mold occur. It's what we're doing when we're preserving is driving out moisture. Well, it doesn't matter what kind of preserving we're doing, we're always lowering the moisture content. And if you've done that through your processing, however you do it, and then you sort of leave it open to the air by not sealing it effectively, then any moisture and molds and bacteria in the air can thrive in a damper atmosphere. If you've driven out the moisture and you've lowered the water content, if they can't survive on properly made jam or any other preserve. So you need to be mindful of the moisture. That's the overriding thing that you need to take into account. And I know years ago we used to put cellophane on, bits of paper, wax sometimes, all sorts of things. And sometimes, you know, it could be open to the air and it still wouldn't get mold on it. It would get dusty, but it wouldn't grow mold because it was properly made to the right recipe, the right amount of sugar, the right amount of acid, and that's what keeps it safe. So, but I suggest that you don't stint on replacing your jar lids. Again, if you've got a recycled jar and you've washed the lid and it doesn't smell of somebody's pasta sauce and you're going to seal your marmalade with it, good. But it's not good if the inside has got lots of rust, because that's going to flake and fall into your preserve. So again, they're a few pence each. If you can get new lids, now and again, replace them. And you could use, at home, you could reuse your commercial, you know, your product lid 2 or 3 times maybe. But after that, replace it and get some new ones, because there's no point having the ingredients, having the sugar, having the power to cook it, and then spoiling it all because you've got a rusty lid or some other contamination on it. And equally, don't use lids that smell strongly of something. You know, if you've got chutney smelling lids, then keep them for chutney. And marmalade is the same. It will, after it's sealed a jar with marmalade in, it will smell very strongly of that. And I don't know of a way of removing that effectively. So just think about it a little bit. And if you can, have decent lids. And there's lots to choose from these days. And this is coming up to the boil. I'm just checking it. And then we're going to, once it's boiling, I'm going to put the timer on. No more questions. You see, as soon as you stir something, it cools it down, which is why once you've got the boil going, you don't want to keep stirring it, because the heat will be released and it will extend the amount of time that you've got to cook it for. What you're trying to do is get enough heat in to the whole pan full of fruit, sugar, water, whatever you've got in there, for jams, things that you want to set. You need to get enough heat in so that the sugar is reacting with the acid, the lemon juice, the lime juice, and the fruit juice as well. If you've got things like raspberries, they've all got acid in. That reacts with the heat and the sugar to create the set. It's a bit like making a runny fudge. You know, if you've ever made fudge or toffee, and you cook it until the sugar is heated and it converts into a different state. And that's what you have to achieve. So don't be afraid of the rolling boil. Get the heat in, get it cooking. Don't leave it unattended, and keep an eye on it. If it's coming up the pan quickly, you can lift it off. You know, don't stand there and sort of, oh, what shall I do? Just lift it off. Have a heat proof mat beside you so that you've got somewhere to put it. And just be careful. You know, don't do anything too rapidly that you could splash it on yourself or anything like that. So I can hear it coming up to the boil. And for the short amount of time that it is going to be boiling madly, it isn't going to burn. There's too much liquid, and so you don't need to worry about that. It's only if it's extended, and you will find that jam will, as we say, catch with things like plums. Stone fruits are particularly bad. Things like apricots, they will catch, but marmalades, it was only if you left it and forgot you were making marmalade that day and it just boiled dry, you know, it won't burn. So if we can go on to the pan cam again, you can see it's starting to boil here. You're getting little pockets of bubbling and froth. The froth comes from the sugar. You don't need to be scooping it off and putting it in the bin or down the sink. Froth is just from the sugar, and we deal with that at the end. Smells amazing, I must say. So I'm going to start the timer. And with Savour orange marmalade, you might be cooking this first stage for sort of 25 minutes before, you know, you're testing it. But lemon and lime, it's much quicker, 10 to 15 minutes. So we need to, I've got the timer on for. And what we're looking for is these bubbles here with the foam spreading so that the whole surface of the pan is like that. It's about the camera's fogging over, you won't be able to see. And as I said, you're trying to get enough heat so that that conversion of the sugar goes on quickly. You don't want to be cooking it and cooking it and cooking it for, you know, 3/4 of an hour or whatever, because you're not achieving the set, because it's not hot enough, because all you're doing is driving off lots of moisture in all this steam, and it will get gluey, it will just get thick, and that isn't what you want. If you think about a really nice marmalade, it's a gel, it's not a sticky, treacly sort of thing. So if you can't get it to set quickly in the sort of 15 minutes, whatever the recipe says, then you need to start thinking, well, did I have it hot enough? Did I have enough sugar? And with jams, it might be that you haven't got enough acid. You might need to put more lemon juice in. So you need to start recognizing what things are preventing what you want to happening. But we'll cover that as we go through. We'll be making all sorts of different things. So I'm just sort of trying to mention a few of the obvious things to me. They're not, you know, they're so that they become obvious to you. So that's, as I say, don't worry about this sort of foamy bit at the edges. I'm just going to give it a stir to even it up a bit. And then we'll talk about when I come to fill the jars. I use a jam funnel, which saves a lot of mess, because if you're trying to pour it any other way, it will make a mess. Well, let's say I will make a mess. So my jars aren't preheated because of the noise of the oven, but best practice is to rinse them out. You can wash them if you want to. You can wash them in a dishwasher. But I would tend to wash them and put them in an oven upside down to dry. It's very important that they're dry. If you do them in the dishwasher, if you've got the type of dishwasher where things come out a bit drippy, then still put them in the oven to dry off. As I said, any moisture, you don't want to be bringing moisture back in to a preserve in a jar. You want it to stay out. So if you then have done all this processing and then you pour the jam into a wet jar, you know, you're not giving yourself a chance. So in an ideal world, they'd be warm, and it stops them being too shocked when you pour in the hot preserve. And then when you fill them, you want to fill them right to the top. Don't leave a gap. Fill them right to the top. And then when we put the lid on and leave it, I'll do it up, obviously, and the jam cools, that hot jam will shrink as it cools, because all hot things are bigger when they're hot than when they cool down. And you will have a gap at the top. You'll have a gap about the length of about the depth of the lugs on the moulding on the jar. But that gap is then a vacuum, and nothing can grow in a vacuum. So you won't get mold, you won't get any yeast growing and that kind of thing. Providing you've got the right quantities in your recipe, you haven't messed about with the amount of sugar, and you've got a dry jar, you should be able to keep that jam for up to 10 years or more, quite safely. Now, the reason that we had dissolved the sugar thoroughly in the pan, stir it before we start the boiling, is to dissolve all the crystals. The sugar is a crystal, as you can see. They're all little, you know, little tiny crystals. And what crystals do is grow and multiply. That's the nature of them. So if you leave undissolved sugar in your preserve, over time, it will get bigger. That one crystal will become 2, will become 4, will become 8, you know. all joined together in a nice crunchy lump, so that when you're eating it and you bite into your toast with your marmalade, you get a bit of a sharp shock in your mouth. And this, won't hurt. Well, it will hurt probably, but it won't harm you. But it's not very nice. So it doesn't really affect the safety of the jam or anything. It doesn't make it go off, but it's not, nice. So that's why we make sure the sugar is dissolved before we start the rolling boil. So I'm on the highest heat, so I can't turn the heat up anymore. I would prefer that the bubbles were over the entire surface, but it's not got there yet. But as a lot of my long-standing students know, the vagaries of electricity supply in a village is sometimes it just isn't there, and we don't get quite as hot as we might do. But we'll trouble, hopefully. And people often ask me about how many jars they'll need for what they're making. Well, it's impossible to say exactly, but a quick way of working things out is to add up all of your ingredients, and grams are interchangeable with milliliters. So this is a 370 ml jar. So if you divide your quantity of ingredients by 370, it will give you roughly how many jars you will need. But it's always best to have 2 or 3 spare, just in case. But it's confusing the way jars are sold. We now have swapped to always selling ours by the milliliter capacity. But when I buy them from a wholesaler, they might be measured in ounces or grams or mil, and it's not an exact conversion each time. So, but what we've got on the website is consistent, so it's a bit easier to work it out. And the base color of the liquid is really pretty. It's very sort of pale lemon, as you'd expect, as it's mostly lemons, but it's good to see. No other questions? Right, I'm going to get my ladle of choice. I use mostly silicone kit because it's completely heat proof. It's not damaged by any length of any sort of height of domestic heat you could give it. It's stable, so you don't have to worry about it. And it also gives a bit, so when you're sort of going around the pan, you can scrape with it and get the very last little bit out. And what I tend to do with jars, if I'm making, well, especially when I was making to sell, I'd have a variety of sizes, because some people prefer a small jar. And then any little bits at the end, I'd put in the little tiny jars so that people could get a sample if they weren't sure what they want. Or sometimes if I had children coming in from school with their parents or after school, I'd give them a little jar to take home for their tea and things like that. But use it all up. Don't ever leave quantity in a pan just because you haven't got enough jars. Put it in like a cereal bowl or something and use it first. It'll be fine. As I said, the worst that will happen to it, if you left it out long enough, it will get dust on it. but you can use it. It doesn't need to be all sealed up to be safe. That's more a convenience than anything else. You will find as well that the colour starts to deepen. This is sort of, and the bubbles get a bit slower. The more the heat is working on the sugar and the acid, the bubbles sort of tend to become not quite so violent. And the colour of the whole pan contents, whatever you're making, it will change. And those are the sorts of things you need to learn to take notice of, so that if you're trying to decide whether it's ready to test or not, if it's still pale and loose and, you know, don't bother. You need it to be further on than that. And it only comes with experience, really, I'm afraid. Three minutes to go, and then we'll see what we've got. Steaming up the windows nicely, so you may have seen on Facebook or Instagram, I've had a delivery of blood oranges, and they're fabulous. They're dark red inside, and they're so hard to get. And I saw on Instagram a scheme called crowd farming, and it's basically buying from the farmer wherever they are in the world, and you sort of deal with a UK base. You order what you want, and it's just delivered straight from the farmer. And I've got 2 boxes of blood oranges, and they're absolutely fantastic. And they're not a bad price either. And there's nothing to do except make the transaction. And you don't have to deal with any of the bringing them into the country and all that business. So if you want to make bulk amounts of things, I recommend you have a look at it, because you can buy, you know, avocados or pineapples or all sorts of things. You know, it depends what the crop is at the time of year in the different parts of the world. So I'll be definitely looking at that again in the future, because the last few years the blood oranges have been very disappointing. That you know, they just look like ordinary oranges, and inside and out. So there didn't seem a lot of point, really. But these are fantastic. And I particularly like blood orange marmalade. It has just a beautiful sort of fragrance to it almost, and colour, of course. So it's quite a deep colour if you manage to get the proper oranges that are that colour inside. So because you get all the juice, and because with sweet oranges you can include the whole orange. You don't need to be like Seville's, where you're taking out all the inside membrane and all the pips, because that's all there is when you cut open a Seville orange. There isn't much else except pips and a very tough membrane. We don't want that. You just basically use the skin. But if you cook them whole, as I did with the lemons, that the peel and the pith is very, very soft. So, and they're easy to take out the middles. But with sweet oranges, you can use the whole lot. So that's the first 15 minutes, and I may have to sort of put it back on again. Now I'm going to take it off. Just to put some on my saucer. Give it a bit of a stir, just to even it up. And then put some on like that, and then I'm going to get my lovely assistant here to pop it into the fridge for me. Yes, I will, Rosie. Now, where shall I put that? Put it in there for the moment. I'll go and get them in a minute while we're waiting for that to set or not. I'm going to put that back on there just in case it's not quite ready yet. Just let it sort of keep bubbling over. It's called crowd farming. You know, like crowd funding, it's crowd farming. And if you just Google that, you'll get the one for your country. So, you know, if you're obviously in the UK, then you want I think it's got an EN extension on, it's crowdfunding.en or .uk, I'm not sure. Could you perhaps bring the box? I'll show you my blood oranges while we've got a minute waiting for the. I've got 2 boxes of 6 kilos. So this is the fruit in the box. Oh, knock over the box. And you can see they've got the lovely sort of blush on the skin. And you cut one open, find something to cut it on. Right. And there's the lovely colour of them, which is fantastic. And I think what we're getting sometimes is a lot of things that are called blood oranges, but they aren't sort of the real deal. So I think, Trev, will put it up on the sidebar for you. Oh, that's great. You're getting some as well. Brilliant. Yeah. So I'm going to be using those in a workshop in 2 or 3 weeks' time. And I shall also make some marmalade. And if I can't get it all done in time, again, they freeze beautifully. Just put them in a bag, a carrier bag or a big polythene bag, and put them in the freezer. And then you can take out however many you need. And if you're going to make marmalade, you can cook them from frozen, or you can defrost them, whichever you prefer. So let's have a look at our tester. I'll just get it from the fridge. Now, it looks quite runny still, but it has got a sort of surface tension. When you do these tests, it's still quite warm actually, but I can see a sort of pitting, a bit like the orange peel, but on the surface of this. Now, I'll test this one, but I think having had another 5 minutes or so, it will benefit it because you can see it's sort of runny there. But you can also see the set starting to happen, that slight crinkle there. But it's not very strong, so I'm just going to this is still warm. I can feel it's warm under the saucer, so if I'd left it in there a bit longer, it would probably have been better. But what you'll be looking for is for this to be gel, and when you push it like that, it will crinkle up ahead of your finger when you push it. But I mean, you shouldn't be able to test it twice, but pop that back in the fridge if you wouldn't mind. But if it doesn't, if there's no crinkle, put it back on the hob and boil it for a little bit longer and test it about every 5 minutes for the lemon and lime, because it doesn't take as long as the Seville. I like the crowd farming because, of course, the money you pay, apart from there's obviously some admin in between me and the farmer, but it's a lot less. He will get, or she will get, a lot more for their crop than if it has to go through umpteen agents and middlemen and everything. So that's why I liked it, because you could do that. Now, this time around, you can see the boil is over the whole of the surface, which is really what I was looking for before. This rolling boil right the way across. So I'll give it 2 or 3 minutes at that. Then, irrespective of whether we have a set, I will show you what to do next, and then you will know, if you're going to make it yourself, what to do. We'll assume a set, whether there is one or not. Right. I'm going to turn that off. Take that off of there. Because there was sort of a crinkle at the earlier stage, having given it that extra boil and a bit extra time, I'm going to carry on. I will do another saucer, but what I want to show you is the filling. Put some more on the saucer. Going in the fridge. Now, forget so there, if it will stand on there. Forget the camera switched over. You can see I've just given that a couple of stirrs, and the foam that was on there has dispersed. And actually, I can feel this feels thicker. It's more syrupy. So I'm quite hopeful. Now, what we have to do, and don't groan, when you're making marmalade, when you're making strawberry jam, anything that's got bits in, or whole fruit that you want to kind of make the fill of the jar even, you leave it standing for about 20 minutes. And I'm not going to make you sit there while I do that. I'm going to, these are jars for me, so it doesn't matter what happens to them, really. I say me, us. You put your funnel in. I suggest this is the bit of kit. If you're going to make a lot of preserves, get yourself a jam funnel with a wide cup and spout. But make sure when you buy it, it fits in the jam jars, because a lot of funnels have been made, and when the buyer specifies it, and they're almost all made in China, they give the size of the neck of the jar. Well, you don't want that. You want the internal measurement. Excuse me. So I've got silicone ones because they are heat proof, and so I take this out of the way. And also, I don't like the clatter of the metal on the glass, so it sets my teeth on edge. So I like the silicone one. So you would leave this to stand for about 20 minutes. It will still be blisteringly hot when you put it in the jars, but the gel part of the preserve will have started to, at a chemical level, it would have started to gel. Now you won't see that. It won't be like a thick jelly in the pan. It just means it's started its gelling process, which means when you put the ladlefuls into the jar, the peel stays where you put it. It doesn't all rise to the top of the jar. At the moment, it's too thin and the peel will just float up to the top, which I will show you. Now, if it's just for you, it doesn't really matter. It just means that there's a lot of peel that you've got to wade through. You've got to stir it or something when you go to eat it so that everybody gets, an even amount. But if you're making it, properly, you should try and get this even distribution so that it looks better and you don't have that gel and fruit division. Now fill right to the top of the jar, as I said, which is usually just where the cup meets the spout. If you take that out, it's then right at the top. So you don't have to be doing this and sort of pouring it all over the place, trying to look. You just look down the funnel and there is some peel at the top, but actually this is another indication that it's ready to jar up because the peel is quite even and that's very hot. So I'm going to put the lid on and do it up. You only just do it till it bites on those lugs. Don't lean down on it and do this business because all these lugs inside the lid, these folded over bits, fit onto those bits. And if you push past, you see they're only that long. And if you push past that, it will strip the lugs on the lid and you'll never do it up. You've got to throw it away. So that's not too bad. It could do with standing a little bit, but that also tells me that it's going to set fine because otherwise all that peel will be at the top. And we'll have a look at the one in the fridge just so that we can prove the point.
This one?
Right, this is the first one I did. Just still a bit runny, but a little bit of a crinkle. Hang on. This is the first one. Little bit of a crinkle there at the edge. This is the second one, which is this, as it is now. And it's difficult for you to see, but it's very ripply on the top. And if I push it, you can see the crinkle is obvious. And that is the gel on the coldest bit, which is the surface. And it's an indication that it's going to set all the way through. There you can see. So it's easy to see. So I'm going to finish off putting all this in the jars. I hope that's kind of straightened out a few problems with marmalade making and will encourage you to have a go. It's well worth it, and I can guarantee that once you've tasted your own marmalade, you'll never buy another jar of shop-made marmalade again. The flavour is just incredible in comparison. Next time it is making a spice kit, and this is assembling your spices and making them into other flavorings and rubs and mixes that you can use in the kitchen to just elevate your everyday meals incredibly. So that's going to be fun. It's going to be all jars out on the table. We'll also have our photographer here, taking photographs for us. So it's probably going to be quite a fun evening. So I'll see you next time. Happy marmalade making.